This is going to be my pitch to people who don't believe we should go trade for Deebo Samuel.
No huddle, Wilson end zone, caught, touchdown, Elijah Moore.
What is going on, guys? Welcome back to Talking Jets with Tego, and today I wanted to go over the reasons why I believe we should trade for Deebo Samuel and try to change some people's minds who are anti-Deebo Samuel or want us to keep the picks or any sort of anti-Deebo Samuel rhetoric in this league. So before we hop into the video, guys, remember to hit the subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow. We're slowly but surely growing and getting our name out there and being able to interact with other Jets YouTubers and things like that. And it's really, really cool. And I really, really appreciate all of the support. So please hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, do all of those things. It really helps the YouTube algorithm. It really helps my channel grow and me invest more time and things into the channel. Now let's hop right into it. So, I don't think we have to talk about all of the statistical anomalies and all of the different things that Deebo is, right? I do want to talk about some historically great things that Deebo did last season, and obviously I think we all know that he had a historically great season last year, right? He was first-team All-Pro, he went to the Pro Bowl, he put up almost 1,800 all-purpose yards, like, guy was insane. But let's just talk about some of the crazy stats that I saw. What's his name? I forget his name. Paul Andrew Essen Jr., Boy Green, put up these stats on Twitter. And I'm just going to read out a couple of them because I think that they're really, really important to give you context of what type of receiver we're really getting and acquiring in our system. So, Deebo became the first player in history last year, in the history of the NFL, to have 1,400 receiving yards, at least 1,400 receiving yards, and then on top of that, add 300 rushing yards in the same season. No player in NFL history has ever done that before. His 8 rushing touchdowns were also the most by any wide receiver in a season, and it was the first time since 1970 merger that the receiver led his team in that category. So it's the first time ever that a wide receiver had 8 rushing touchdowns, but it was also the first time ever that a wide receiver, not the first time ever, but the first time since the 1970 merger that a wide receiver led his team in rushing touchdowns. Which is just a crazy, crazy stat if you really think about it. And like I said, it's one of those crazy, crazy stats. And then this is the one for me that really, 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 really like blew my mind away, is that his yards after the catch per reception was about 10 yards after the catch per reception this year. Only the second time in the last 15 years that a qualified wide receiver had hit that mark. It's the second time in the last 15 years. Do you know who was the first person to do it in the last 15 years? Who's at number 1? Deebo Samuel in 2020. Now, I am going to put a caveat on that because in 2020, he only played in 7 games, and he only started in 5 of those 7 games because of the injury. So the workload isn't as much because obviously he's an explosive play kind of guy, but I'll put that caveat there. And then the other one is that he averaged 13.1 yards per reception on targets at or behind the line of scrimmage. That was better than 52 qualified receivers and averaged on all targets last season. It's a crazy stat because it just goes to show how much production you're getting out of this guy, right? And so we can talk about that. We can also talk about, in my opinion, what's a really, really important thing to say is that when you look at the receiving statistics and everything like that coming out of San Francisco, he was so far and ahead of everybody on that team with not very many more receptions. George Kittle had 71 receptions for 910 yards. In 6 more carries, Deebo Samuel was able to add almost 500 yards more than him. And you can have the argument, oh, it's a tight end versus whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I totally get that. But how is it that with Brandon Ayuk, who's no slump, right, either, who didn't miss a game last year with almost 60 targets, was able to only put up 826 yards, while Deebo with an extra 20 targets, or not 20 targets, 20 receptions, put up 1,400 receiving yards. It just goes to show how much better he is at the rush, like at the receiving aspect of the game. And then when we add like the rushing part of the game, Elijah Mitchell was their bell cow of a running back last year. He ran for almost 1,000 yards last year, and that's crazy. And that was on 207 attempts in 11 games. That's a really, really crazy stat to think about. But when you look at it and you go, hey, Deebo Samuel put up a third of those numbers, right? Because he put up 365 yards, which is about a third of that 963 in 16 games, really, yes. But we have to remember that he only started being used as a running back after week 10. So in about 7 weeks, with a third of the carries, with about a quarter of the carries, because he rushed 60 times versus Elijah Mitchell's 210 times. He got about a third of the yards. He was just productive, man. It's crazy to look at when you look at a player like this young, and the production and the value that he brings. The other thing that I think people who are anti-Deebo Samuel need to take into consideration is like, guys, I don't think we're as far away from being a competitive team as people think that we are. Cincinnati last year, or 2 years ago, right? Because last year they went to the Super Bowl. Cincinnati 2 years ago was 4-12. They had a really good offseason, which I think we've had this year. They added a number 1 stud wide receiver, and they went to the Super Bowl. The Buffalo Bills, a couple of years ago, were an okay team. They were picking right in the middle of the rounds and all of that stuff, right? They weren't great. I think they had 6 wins, 7 wins, or something like that. Josh Allen wasn't looking great. They traded for for Stephon Diggs, gave him a contract, brought him in to a team that already had a pretty decent offseason, and brought in pieces, fixed that offensive line, and started addressing that defense in a really good way. Boom. Immediate playoff berth. Josh Allen is now immediately being in the conversation for one of the best quarterbacks in football. Guys, we've seen both aspects of it. When you trade for an elite wide receiver and you bring him onto a football team, we saw that with Buffalo. We face that team twice a year. We see what Stephon Diggs did for that offensive scheme and for those offensive guys in Buffalo. It's hard to stop that offense because you have Stephon Diggs, and it creates so much space for everybody else on that team. Deebo can be our Stephon Diggs. We would be getting Stephon Diggs at, I think, a younger age than what Buffalo got. We would be getting Deebo at a younger age than what Buffalo got Diggs for. I think, right? I think he would be a year younger. And I think this would be a massive, massive add to the team when the offensive production, because we have other elite wide receiver weapons. I think Elijah Moore is a wide receiver 1 in the making. I think he's going to be insanely good. And when you have Deebo helping him create space on the other side, because you can't ignore Deebo, it's going to be great. Corey Davis, we saw what he looked like when he was a high-end number 2 in Tennessee with A.J. Brown and stuff like that. It's a reason we gave him that money. That's what I think Corey Davis is a high-end number 2. You know, Braxton Berrios, look at all the gadget plays and the things that we did with him last year in a decimated wide receiver room where he was literally just our number 1 target. We were just throwing the ball right at him with no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And so I don't think we're as far as people want to believe that we are. Guys, we took we took the Bucs to the last 2 minutes of the game late into the season. And no one's going to sit here and tell me that they weren't trying that game. I think they absolutely were. Like, absolutely they were trying hard because they were playing for the home field advantage. And, like, they were playing and jockeying for position to play games in Tampa. It was a big game for them. Obviously, we lost that game, but we took them to the final 2 minutes of the game. If Zach Wilson hands that ball off to Braxton Berrios, we're talking about a team that beat the Bucks, like that's a conversation that we're having late in the year when Zach started turning his season around and started looking good. And I'm going to leave you with this last question. I saw this question from Buffalo Jet fan. It is, in my opinion, one of the best questions you could ask about this, right? And that is, and this is his question. I wonder if defensive coordinators of the Patriots, Bills, and Dolphins would prefer the Jets trade for Deebo or hang on to the draft capital. Guys, if the offer is 10 and San Francisco's willing to take that, 10 was going to be a receiver anyway. And Deebo's established in this league and we know what he's going to be. If it's 35, 38, and 69, that's also, I'm okay with that package. Because you know what we also have? The number 10 overall pick. We can trade back and reaccumulate those assets. Guys, we trade players away and we go through a teardown, accumulating all of this draft capital for situations like this. To go out and get players that are going to be impactful players for this team. And I understand the argument that some people have, like especially Leger. I see him all over Twitter with this beef, which is like, how are we going to stop the run and all that stuff? If the pick is 10, you know how we stop the run? With picks 4, 35, 38, 69, 111, 114. Like, we still have a bevy of picks. And like, let's not also forget that we brought in players this offseason to fill in the depth on the offensive line. Does everybody forget the fact that our defense was decimated last year? That we didn't see a single snap out of Vinny Curry? We didn't see a single snap out of Carl Lawson? That some of the rookies and stuff that we took in the draft, we didn't get to see them play because they got hurt? Like, when you add an edge rusher at 4, which is what we're going to do, we're going to add a high-end edge rusher at 4, a Kayvon Thibodeau, a Jermaine Johnson, something along those lines. Like, when we add one of those guys at 4, you really think that it's not going to elevate the rest of our game? Come on, guys. I really, truly believe that the rest of our defense is going to get better. It's going to become elite. And you're going to see that once we solidify that defensive line, the rest of the defense is going to fall right into place. And we added elite pieces in the cornerback room and in the safety room with DJ Reed and Jordan Whitehead. So, that's my pitch, guys. Let me know what you guys think. I'd love to hear why you're for the trade, why you're against the trade, anything like that. Let me know. Guys, we're so close to the draft. It's crazy to think about. We are like 5 days away if you include today, right? But like, it's Sunday. We're almost at the end of Sunday. Like, we're 4 days away from the draft. This is really, really exciting stuff. I'm really excited. We've got a full docket of content this week. So stay tuned, hit that subscribe button. And last but not least, go Jets.